thank you all for joining us today. My name is Gershon Margolis, and I am the founder of Imperial Advisory. I'm pleased to be joined by our guest speaker, Lori Karpman, as well as several people from our team, my partner, Bob Doyle, Jim Altieri, one of our CFOs, and Jennifer. We may have some others from our team coming later. And Jennifer, thank you for putting this all together and making sure that this and everything else important happens. And thank you to all our guests for joining us both on here and on the live stream. If you're on the live stream and you want to ask questions, you should probably join the Zoom. Or I guess you can ask there. But anyway, let me tell you a drop about Imperial Advisory, and then I will introduce our speaker. Imperial Advisory is a team of fractional CFOs. Right now we've got 8 CFOs, and we go into businesses and we help them make better business decisions. So traditionally in large organizations, the CFO, the chief financial officer, is often the most trusted advisor of the CEO. And while a smaller business may not have that role on a full-time basis, we go into businesses and we help fill that role on a part-time basis. And we help the CEO have someone they can lean on, whether it's tactical or strategic, and helping make better decisions and helping grow the company, helping deal with strategy so that they can so that the CEO can focus on what they usually are focusing on to grow the business, which typically will be sales or operations or a whole host of other things besides for finance. We pick up where the bookkeeping and accounting leave off. And again, we provide the strategy and help take our clients to the next level. One of the things that we help clients with is figuring out how they can grow, analyzing growth. And many clients will look at revenue as their primary way that they should grow. And sometimes revenue is profitable. Quite often there are ways to bring in more revenue and it's not profitable. And that's definitely something that we bump into a lot. But one of the ways that I think you can get revenue that in theory shouldn't have that much incremental cost is by having somebody else pay you and then them running the business. So at least that's how I think a franchise is. So I guess I'm sure we'll learn a lot more today. And I know that Bob has dealt with franchising in the past, so I'm sure he'll have plenty to add, or some things to add. But yeah, if a business owner wants to grow, the way I think of it is if someone will pay you a fee and then go run their own business and you teach them what you already know, that could be pretty cool. So anyway, I'm really pleased to have Lori Karpman here to give us some insight into this facet of business. Lori is, I think, a recovering attorney.
Yes.
And she's been dealing with franchises for quite a while now, and she helps in all phases. If anyone is looking to buy a franchise, you should reach out to her too. But that's not what the topic of our webinar today. The topic of our webinar today is from a business's perspective. Why would you want a franchise? How would you do it? And without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Lori.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I was really delighted when Gershon asked me to present on franchising. I've been in the franchise industry for over 30 years. As Gershon said, I'm a recovering attorney, so I did practice law for 27 years, franchise law in particular. And I've been a franchisor twice, and I've also been a master franchisee. And for the past 20 years, I have a full service consulting firm. We specialize in multi-unit business development, in particular the franchising and the licensing models. And we're pretty well known in the industry for what we do. I'm Canadian, so up here in Canada, they call me the franchise queen, because when you've been doing it as long as I have, you've got that experience behind you. So what I thought I would share with you today is I have just a really short presentation, just a few slides on what is franchising, why would you want to franchise your business, and if you did, what are the things you need to know in order to make your business franchisable. I'm just going to share my screen. Everybody sees my screen okay? Okay. So why is this not working? Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. They're all different. So the first question to ask yourself is, what is a franchise? So a franchise is a license. You are giving someone the right and license to use your name, your brand, and your operations experience. So a license becomes a franchise when certain criteria exist. So the first criteria is that the franchisee's business is substantially associated with the franchisor's trademark. So that's the signage, that's the way things look, that's the merchandising. The franchisee pays an initial and/or continuing fee for the right to enter and remain in the business. And the franchisor exercises control or provides assistance to the franchisee. So when you buy a franchise, the franchisee pays two fees. They pay what's called an initial franchise fee, which is somewhere between $20,000 and $60,000, depending on the brand. And that is the only money that actually goes into the hands of the franchisor. The balance of the investment. So let's say you want to buy a pizza place and it's $300,000 is the total investment. $50,000 of that, let's say, would go to the franchisor. The balance goes towards construction, inventory, supplies, grand opening, marketing, and working capital. So the franchisee pays this initial franchise fee, and what they're paying for is the right and license to use the brand. So that's what they're paying for. Then they pay a continuing fee, which we call a royalty. They pay that on a monthly basis. It's anywhere from 2 to 8% of gross sales. So it's always calculated on the gross. And it gets paid monthly to the franchisor. And that money is for the continued right and license to use the franchisor's trade name, their goodwill, and their system. The control that the franchisor has to have over the franchisee for it to be a franchise is that the franchisor must control almost everything about the business operations. So they control hours, they control uniforms, they control supply, they control location. So they control everything about how the business operates. And that's what makes this different, franchising different from licensing. In licensing, you are getting the right to use someone's name and goodwill. So we think of licensing, you can think of the t-shirt companies that are licensed by Disney or Coke or Nike to put their logos on it. That's a license. And in that case, the franchisor or the brand is not providing you with day-to-day support. They're providing you with product, they're providing you with logos, they're providing you with new designs, but they really don't have control over your operation. In a franchise, they have complete control over your operation. And so these are the three things in order for it to be considered a franchise. Business is associated with the franchisor's trademark. Franchisee pays an initial and a continuing fee, and the franchisor exercises control and provides assistance to the franchisee. Why would you franchise your business? Franchising is a pure financial decision. Very simple. That's all it is, a financial decision. So let's say you want to put up 10 locations this year, and they're $100,000 each. So as a business, you have options. You have financing options. So you can go to the bank. You go to the bank, you borrow $1 million. So now you've created debt. You've been paying interest on that debt. And now you are physically opening and running and managing 10 locations, which means that you need a bigger infrastructure. You need a lot of employees. You may need office space. It all becomes very expensive. The other way to do it is what I call growing your brand using other people's money. So if a location is $100,000, you find individual investors who have $100,000 to invest, and they are willing to follow your system to the T. And we call those people franchisees. So it's easier to find 10 people who have $100,000 than to go out and borrow $1 million and then manage 10 locations. Here, you're not worried about managing 10 locations because you know that there's an owner in each one that's managing it. So what do you get when you buy a franchise? Very simple. When you buy a franchise, you get the right to use the name and the marks to earn a living. You get to use their franchisor's system. Franchisors have operations manuals and style guides. The operations manual is a playbook, and it tells the franchisee how to operate the business with, after they have their initial training. They have this operations manual that they can refer to when they have questions about the day-to-day operation of the business. So one of the most important assets that a franchisor needs to create to be able to franchise their system is an operations manual and a style guide. Those are the two most important documents. When you're buying a franchise, you're getting the goodwill that's associated with the brand. So let's say we look at McDonald's. Everybody knows what a McDonald's is. When you're in a McDonald's, doesn't matter where you are in the world, when you're in a McDonald's, you know that you're in a McDonald's. There are identifying characteristics. Now, they're really good about making their locations fit the look and feel of the environment that the location is in. But you know, regardless, a Big Mac is a Big Mac. It doesn't matter where you go. And the key to success in franchising is consistency. And I'll give you a perfect example. I used to be a franchisor. I had a chain of restaurants. And one of the largest products that we used the most in my restaurants was chicken. And we bought kosher chicken that was not pumped. It was not salted. It was 100% pure grain-fed chicken. And that was one of our biggest sellers. I had one of my franchisees that decided that they didn't want to pay the money to buy the quality of chicken that we normally use. And so they went to another supplier and they got this other chicken, which was pumped full of salt and was horrible. And I started to get complaints at home office. You know, I went to this location. I've been there before. I went there again. The chicken was horrible. I'm not going back. So I was really upset about this because my partner and I had invested over $1 million in creating this brand. So I went to see the franchisee and I said to him, listen, you bought the system because the system works. I'm getting a lot of complaints about your product. So I know you're not using approved product and you need to get rid of whatever it is that you have, sell it, take it home. I don't care what you do with it, but it cannot show up on a customer's plate and you need to buy the right chicken. Well, he refused. So I closed him down. Very simple. I didn't play games. If you're not going to follow the system, don't buy a franchise. Because what was happening was that you've got one franchisee who's in Montreal, who's now ruining the business of my franchisee who's in Quebec City. How does that work? Well, I'm in Montreal and I go to this restaurant and I have a horrible experience. Now I'm in Quebec City. And my friend says to me, oh, look, there's an ABC restaurant. I'm going to say, no, they're horrible. I went to the one in Montreal and it was horrible. So now you've got an operator in Ottawa or in Quebec City who is running a great operation. And he's losing business because someone else in the system was not following the rules. And that's why franchisors are really specific about enforcing and enforcement of every single rule in their operations manual. Because if you have one rogue franchisee, they're not ruining their business, they're ruining the entire system. So this was someone who, you know, he bought a franchise. And when I speak on franchising, I tell people that franchisees are the luckiest people in the world. They are getting to decide what they're going to do every day, who they're going to do it with, and what kind of work they're going to do. So there is a franchise out there for anything. Whatever you have as a hobby, a franchise exists for that. So people really need to make sure that they're, you know, that they're getting into the right thing and that they're getting into the right system, and to make sure that they understand completely that they're buying a set of rules. They're buying a business in a box. Tried and true method of doing business under a specific brand name. If you buy this franchise and you follow our rules, you will make money. It's a very simple equation. Ultimately, franchisees get into a system. Within 6 months, they decide that they know how to do something better, faster, cheaper than the franchisor, and they start making changes. The day they start making changes is the day they start losing money. Because people seem to forget that they bought it because they were buying a system, and then they stop using the system, and then they come to people like me when I was practicing law saying, you know, they sold me a lemon. Well, no, they didn't sell you a lemon. Did you follow the system? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And you know, if the client says to me, no, well, I didn't do those things. I don't think this is smart. I don't think that is smart. I say, you know what? Go away. Follow all the rules of the system for 3 months, every single thing to a T. If you still think you were sold a bill of goods, come back and see me in 3 months. But I guarantee you that we won't be seeing each other because you'll be making money. So consistency is really the most important thing in franchising. So if you have a client and they're thinking of franchising, what should you be looking for? So there are 5 key factors to a successful franchise brand. And the first is to determine whether or not the business can be franchised. And it requires an evaluation of 5 of these factors. So the first thing is you have to have a successful business. That goes without saying. For clients to work with me to do franchise development, they need to have at least one location that has 1 full year of profitability. So if you're not making money, you cannot franchise your business. No one's going to invest in you. So you need to be able to show that using the system that you've created, you have a track record of success. The next thing is whether or not your business is scalable. Scalable means literally you could teach a monkey to do it. That's the thing about franchising. And that's why it's such a great model, because it doesn't matter what business you've done before, doesn't matter what business you want to get into. If you're getting into a business that is scalable because we can teach people how to do things, then you're going to have a successful business. So you need to be able to scale your brand. When we talk about scalability, often when a new franchisor is setting up, this is the time that we need to set and put in place those procedures and products that are going to make sure that their business is scalable. And those are things like if you're a restaurant, for example, and you're buying dishes. Well, you need to make sure that the dishes that you're buying in New York, someone else who's in Texas can also get those same dishes. You need to make sure when you're setting up a source of supply that franchisees across the country are going to be able to get the same products. So you have to look, when you start out on day one, you look at the big picture and you say, if I wanted to open a restaurant or I wanted to open a location that's 1,000 miles from here, would I be able to with the products and the service providers that I'm currently using? The next thing is your brand needs to be protectable. By protectable, we mean that you can trademark it. So you need to be able to trademark the name, and you need to be able to get basically the worldwide rights to your name. So if you're in the US, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to trademark your name in Canada and the US, because Canada is the next logical area of expansion. So, and I've had clients where I have a client who's Canadian, and they're called Trade Secrets in Canada. But Trade Secrets was taken in the US. So in the US, they're called Glamour Secrets. So there's a situation of a brand that couldn't trademark its name in the US. They were very successful in Canada. It's very hard to take advantage of that success when you can't go under the same name. So you have to be able to prove to someone that, you know, even if we change the name, the business will still be successful. You need to be committed to growing a franchise system. That means you have to be committed to putting in systems and procedures and following them. So finding the right software, finding the right intranet, finding the right communication tools, finding people. By the time you get to probably about 10 locations, you're going to need an operations manager. You'll probably need a marketing manager. So you need to realize that as you start to scale your business, you're going to need to have a team, and you need to have the money to be able to invest in that team. Because without that team, you can't scale. And you need to have the right budget. So a budget for franchising your business, if a brand comes to me and they have nothing and they need to start from scratch, it's about $80,000 to $100,000. That includes everything they need. So a new franchisor, when they come to me, they need a strategic plan. How are they going to build and sell their franchises? They need a strategic marketing plan. How are they going to recruit their franchisees? How much money do they need to spend? And what are the outlets and media sources that they're going to use? They need to have an operations manual. And when I have clients that are new starting in business, I tell them to write the operations manual as they're building their location. So as you're going along, you can write your manual. You need to have some kind of a CRM system or a marketing system for the franchisees to use. And you need to have, obviously, your legal documents and your accounting documents. So insofar as legal documents, you need a franchise agreement. And then you need what's called a franchise disclosure document. A franchise disclosure document is a document that is registered with the state, depending on what state you're in. Sometimes it's registered, sometimes it's not. But most states are registration states. And so you actually need to register your franchise and get approval before you can start selling franchises. Your FDD, or franchise disclosure document, has to be registered with the state before you can start selling in that state. So the legal documents, probably about 20 grand. The ops manual is also about 15 to 20. The marketing plan is about 5,000. Then I usually put in a budget for marketing of about 20,000 for the first year. So if you add that up, you're getting to with a marketing budget of 20 grand, you're getting to be right around $100,000. There are a lot of groups. I'm in Canada. Most of my work is in the US. There are a lot of firms in the US that do what I do. The difference being that, we do everything here in-house. We're a small boutique firm. We do everything in-house. And we don't have the same overhead as a lot of these big, large firms. So, our fees is I say between 80 and 100, whereas the US franchise development groups, they're usually in about the $200,000 range. So we've been very successful because we can offer the same service. We feel better service because it's one person who's managing the entire project for less than that amount. I see, let me go in the chat. The bulk, okay, so here from Fred. The bulk of the upfront franchise payment goes to build out. Are there typically provisions in the agreement for overages, and who's responsible for the overages? It's a really good question. In the agreement, if there are overages, the overages are to be paid by the franchisee. So what happens when you buy a franchise is that the franchisor goes with you to find a location. They find a location, they get the designer and the architects to come in, draw plans, and then they'll usually tender it to 3 different construction groups. Ultimately, it's the franchisee who's going to decide which construction group they want to go with. And they contract directly with the general contractor. So the franchisor is not part of that relationship. The franchisor does all the supervision, gives them the plans, tells them where to buy everything and where to put it, but they don't actually do the work. So that work is done by the GC, and the GC contracts directly with the franchisee. So if there's any overages, it's going to be the franchisee, like change orders and things. It's going to be the franchisee that will pay that. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay. Well, this was just a little bit here about, my firm, which I just told you before, we deliver all of the services that a growing brand needs under one roof. And, our tagline is that we even worry for you. So that's what we do for our clients. So everything, insofar as our clients, it's very seamless. And I think that, that's really something when you're going to franchise your business, you want things to be seamless. You want to have the same person looking over your marketing and branding who's looking over your legal documents to make sure that your marketing and branding are legal in accordance with your legal and your franchise documents. So that's what we provide. We're a full service firm, and that's what we provide. But I'm not here to promote my business, just let you know who we are and what we do. And if anybody has any questions for me about franchising, I would be happy to answer.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we spoke a little bit earlier. I mean, you shared a story about when you pulled a franchise license from someone. Is that a difficult thing to do? Do you need to prove that imagine someone puts down 100,000 or 500,000, buys a franchise, does the build out, and then you just decide that you don't like something about what they're doing? Is it a complicated process? Can you get sued for pulling that?
You can, if you do it for really small petty reason. You can't, someone's invested a lot of money. You can't just take this away, but you can take it away if they're damaging the goodwill of the brand. So if they're damaging the goodwill of the brand, they don't get to keep their franchise, because their actions don't only affect their location, it affects the entire system. It's not easy to get rid of a franchisee, and franchisors have to be really careful about who they accept in the first place, because if you've got a bad franchisee and he's a troublemaker and he doesn't basically follow the rules, unless he's really causing damage, it's very hard to get them out. So franchisors have to be really diligent about who they're selecting as their franchisees in the first place.
Okay. And when someone wants to sell, how much control do you have over who they sell to? So now it's their business.
Right. It's their business. They can sell it to who they want. But the same way that a new franchise candidate has to go through the interview process and the discovery process with the franchisor, the new franchisee, meaning the transferee or whoever you sell it to, has to go through that same thing and do the training, and has to prove to the franchisor that they have the money to run the business and that they have the skills. So you can sell your business, but the buyer has to be approved by the franchisor. But the franchisor doesn't get involved in the transaction. They don't get involved in how much you sell the business for. They don't get involved in the transfer. They just approve or disapprove of the potential buyer.
Do they get a new buy-in fee?
Yes.
Like a new initial fee from the new?
Yes. Yes, they do. And the reason that they do is because the initial fee, it's a really good question. The initial fee also covers training. So if you're selling it, the buyer still needs the same training that the initial franchisee had. But often when you're buying an existing location, the franchise fee is significantly reduced, and it's usually replaced with a transfer fee, which is between $10,000 and $15,000.
Okay. Because the build out doesn't need to be done. That's why.
Correct.
Significantly.
However, it may be a condition of the sale that the premises be renovated. So if you've got a location that's 10 years old and it no longer has the same look and feel as the new ones that you're building, you can say, well, you can sell it, but whoever you sell it to has to put in money to renovate it to our current look.
Could you do that without a sale? Could you go in and say, Dunkin' Donuts, you haven't updated your place in 10 years?
Yeah. Every franchise agreement provides that the franchisor is going to update, and that when they update, the franchisees are going to be required to update. What we do from the legal perspective is we often try to limit it, and we say we're going to cap the renovations at $50,000, or we're going to cap the renovations at $10,000, or for the first term of the agreement, we're not going to, during the term, which is either 5 to 10 years, we'll ask you to renovate after 5 years. You'll be required to renovate. So it's set up in advance. The franchisees know, and the idea is that they know that they're going to have to renovate in 5 years. So they're advised to start putting a little bit of money away every month so that when that time comes, they have the, the money to invest in the renovations.
Interesting. All right, I'm not going to take up all the Q&A.
Yeah, I got a chat here one.
Here.
Michael, one of the most neglected items I see are the audited financial statements. Yeah, it's very interesting. When you have a new franchisor, the franchisor is incorporating a new company. So if you have, let's say you have a corporate location and now you say, I want a franchise, you would incorporate a separate company to be the franchisor. You would never want to commingle your current business with the franchise entity. So you want to protect your assets. You want to creditor proof yourself. You leave your current corporate business. You open up another business called Imperial Advisory Franchising, Inc. That company in its first year is basically when you file your financial disclosure documents, your franchise disclosure documents, you need to file an audited financial statement. The first year, your revenues are it's basically when you first start selling franchise, you have a nil balance sheet. Basically, all your financial statements are nil because the only money that a franchisor has is what they get from initial franchise fees and then what they get from royalties. That's the only thing we put in the franchise company. And the reason that we do that is that we segregate all the franchise income from the franchisor's other income. So if you get sued by a franchisee, the only thing that's in that company is the value of the revenue stream. So, it makes it, I try to creditor proof my clients as much as I can. In subsequent years, they do need to have audited financial statements. So, that's one of the things that, Michael, I agree with you, is that, a lot of them, they don't want to spend the money to go and have proper audited statements. And you can't sell franchises without that. So that does seem to be a holdup for some people.
Why would a franchisee care? Like if you're buying a system and the system works, who cares what's going on with the financials of the parent company?
Because the franchisee wants to make sure that the franchisor is sufficiently capitalized to be able to continue to grow the system, that they're going to be able to hire the people that they're going to need to hire and do the marketing that they need to do. So that's why you want to see their financial statements. You want to know, how much, where does the money come and how much money do they have?
Is there any point at which a franchisee says, you know what, I don't need the franchise anymore and I don't care about that, or decides to try and separate?
If they decide they want to separate, the only way they can do that is by selling their business. Sometimes, let's say you have a really good location. The franchisor may buy it back. So you may have a franchisee who says, I'm done with this, been doing this for 20 years, I want to retire. If they have a good location that's running and there's positive goodwill, the franchisor will buy that unit back from the franchisee and then ultimately go out and resell it themselves.
Can they just rip off the signage and keep going?
No. If they rip off the signage and keep going, they will be faced with an injunction, because franchise agreements are very strict and are ironclad about non-compete provisions. No, you cannot compete. You can't take the sign down and just, name it Gershon's Restaurant. If it was a Pizza Hut, you can't do that. That's just, that's really the hallmark of what's prohibited in franchising. And so franchise agreements are really tough and really strict on that.
What if you sell the location to another person who has no agreement with the original company?
You can't, because when you sign the lease with the landlord, you're signing the lease with the landlord, and which happens in one of two ways. Sometimes the franchisor goes on the head lease and then they sublease to the franchisee. So the franchisee has no control over the premises, right? Or the franchisee goes on the head lease, but as soon as there is a default, the lease automatically transfers to the franchisor.
Oh, interesting.
That's an agreement that we make with landlords that say, in the event that there's a rental default and you're going to terminate the lease will automatically, on that moment, will automatically be assigned to the franchisor. So they do everything they can. You don't want the franchisee to have control of the premises. So if they do have control of the premises, we make an agreement with the landlord that, in the event of a bankruptcy or they stop operating or whatever, the franchisor will come in, remedy the defaults, and will take over the operations. And sometimes they don't even have to remedy the default, but they'll just come in and take the location.
So Lori, I was involved in a situation one time where we were a very large company and we decided to franchise a small piece of what we were doing. We spent all the time, the legal money, and we were successful in creating a franchise. And then the franchise itself was not successful as a business offering. And it was just it was not profitable for us because there was a lot of construction. For a variety of reasons, it was not successful. It was, I just bring it up for illustration for everybody else on the call. I mean, I know you know the answer to this, but I think it's worth talking about. What do you have to go through to unwind once you've done this? Because for us, it was relatively painful.
You're talking about for the franchisor to unwind?
Yes.
Yeah. The franchisor to unwind, what they normally do is they will make an agreement with the franchisees that allows the franchisees to go on and use the name. So the franchisees ultimately will get together. Some of them will decide, yes, they want to use the name and they want to continue. Some of them will decide, no, they don't. The franchisor is bankrupt or dissolving at that point. They don't really care either way. And so a lot of the franchisees will go off on their own and still use the name and the brand and the logo and all of those things. And the franchisees they get together and they create a committee, to operate the franchise, or it just falls apart and everybody goes their separate ways.
Well, we were a very strong company and not going bankrupt or anything like that. So we ended up getting into a situation where we needed to provide support for an extended period of time because people had relied on us to give them the support. So, again, I just bring it up because if you have a business model that looks like you can franchise it and you can go out and take it out on the road and make a lot of money, there is a negative side to it. If the unfortunate situation occurs where it doesn't work, it can become a little painful.
Oh yeah, if it doesn't work, it becomes very painful because then you're on the phone every day with franchisees saying, I'm not making money. Like, what are you going to do for me? Right?
Yeah.
And now they want the franchisor to waive the royalties, but it's a double-edged sword because the franchisor needs that royalties and that revenue stream to operate the business, to do their payroll, to do their admin, right? So if the franchisees are not paying a royalty, the franchisor can't provide services. So the franchisees complain that they're paying royalties, but they want services. So they don't want to pay royalties, but they still want the services. But the franchisor doesn't have the money to give them those services because they're not paying royalties. So it's very circular. So we tend not to give royalty abatements or things like that because, that's the franchisor's lifeline. Lifeline is the revenue stream.
And in fairness, ours was complicated because we did the build outs. And that's the reason it didn't work because we did the build outs. We were losing money because the build outs cost more money than we expected. And then the starting dates were always 6 months further out than we expected. So you had that period of no rent, right? So, and that's what made it so difficult.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest lessons for a franchisor is that it's about the franchisee and the focus needs to be on making sure the franchisees make money. Michael, you hit the nail on the head because if your franchisees are not making money, you are not going to be able to sell more franchises. Very simple. And the franchisors, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was the really heavy-handed franchisor and the poor little guy franchisee. Not like that today. Today, it's a very different arrangement. Franchisors understand now that franchisees are not subordinates, they're partners. And, they need the franchisees as much as the franchisees need them. They need the franchisees to be happy. They need for them to be successful because if they are not happy and successful, you're not going to be able to sell more franchises. Because if you're looking to buy a franchise, what are you going to do? You're going to call the franchisees and you're going to say, are you happy with the system? What kind of support are you getting? Do they help you out? And if the answer to all those things is no, they suck, your whole franchise system is shot. You won't be able to sell. So if your franchisees aren't happy, you have a huge growth problem. Lisa?
I was wondering, excuse me. Oh my goodness. I was wondering if you could talk about the difference between franchising, like, for example, you're using restaurants as examples,
Yep.
but franchising services.
Yep, there's all sorts of services. Any industry that you can think of, you can franchise. So one of the fastest growing segments of the franchise industry actually is the home services industry. So painters, plumbers, contractors, renovation, home maintenance, senior care, keeping the seniors in their home, anything that has to do now, those are really big industries, and those are all service industries. So probably about, there's over 4,000 franchises operating in the US. And I'd say probably about 30 to 35% are in some kind of services industry. So I have clients, for example, that she's in lash extensions. It's a service. Home improvement, painting, those are all services.
Is there an large initial fee over there, or because there's no build out, that's much less expensive? Or do they just?
If there's no build out, it's much less expensive. And that's why you see the biggest proliferation today are home-based franchises. And that started before COVID, although COVID exacerbated it, it started long before COVID, where people were looking for a better quality of life, and they're looking for home-based businesses, and home-based businesses are hundreds of thousands of dollars cheaper than brick and mortar. So, now I'm very particular about the brands that I represent. And when people come to me and they want to buy a franchise, I'm very particular about where I place them. And for me, there has to be a recession-proof business. So I won't take on anything that is going to be completely decimated, other than earthquakes and stuff like that. But, buy something that hits the economy, right? So I put very few people into food service now. I put young people into food service. I don't put, people in their 40s and 50s. I don't put them into food service, even though I think 40s and 50s are young because I'm 60, but I still don't put them in food service. I'll put a young couple into food service. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, whatever you can think of, there's a franchise for. So when I work with clients, they say, well, I don't know what to buy. I say, well, what do you like to do? What are you good at? That's the first place they should look. People think the first question they have to ask themselves is, how much money do I have? And that's really wrong. That's the second question. The first question is, I get up and do something I love every single day. What am I doing? And for people, sometimes it could be, I love to garden. There's gardening franchises. I'm an artist. There's painting franchises. There's for anything that people like to do. And that's why when they come to me and they say, match me with a franchise, I have a system that I take them through to match them with a franchise that would be appropriate for them, that they would be happy in. Because the most important thing is that you have to love what you do. You have to fall in love with the franchise and love what they do and love the people and love the mission. Because if you buy into something that you're not particularly interested in, you won't be successful, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, I love franchising. As I've been doing it for 30 years. I've put hundreds of people into business. I love the satisfaction of watching these people, come back to me later on because they want to acquire a second unit or a third unit. And, it's people who never thought they could ever have their own business and work for themselves are really starting to control their own destiny. So franchising has had a big boon over the past 5 years. COVID certainly exacerbated it because of the fact that people were being laid off and the great resignation, and people are looking for more joy and fulfillment in their life.
All right. Any final questions? All right, I'm going to launch the poll now. If you can all take a minute to answer that, that would be great. We'd appreciate it. And Yeah, so Lori, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who joined us and Jennifer for putting it all together. Thank you, Lori, for the great presentation. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone.
Yeah, if anybody wants to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. It's really easy to connect with me on LinkedIn. My website is lorikarpman.com. So you can always check out my website. And, you know, if anybody wants to have a chat, my schedule's open and it would be my pleasure.
No,
We have
Gershon
one
and
comment
Lori.
from LinkedIn.
I'm sorry?
We have one more comment from LinkedIn.
Oh,
Let
Okay.
me go ahead and paste it into the chat.
Yeah, please.
thanks, Jennifer.
This is from Hershey.
SaaS services, basically franchise software to third party. Yeah, there are a lot of different kinds of franchise software out there, if that's what the question is about. There's a lot of different franchise software out there that help franchisors in operations, that help franchisors with sales. Client Tether is one of my favorites. It's actually a CRM. It's a mixture of your CRM and your marketing software all in one. So, and it's not just for franchising, it's for any industry. And then there's all sorts of other SaaS services, things like, you know, for POS, for intranets, for accounting and finance. There's, you know, there's always a technology fee because there's always technology that the franchisor requires the franchisees to use. Sorts of other SaaS. I'm sorry?
I don't know what that was. Lori and Gershon, there's another comment I think is worthwhile making at this point. You know, all the things that you do to prepare your business to be franchised, those are smart things to do, even if you're not planning on franchising, right? Getting your org chart set up, getting your policy manuals in place, getting your business. You know, I often tell people, work on your business, try and get it to run like a franchise. And you know, to your point, Lori, once you've done that, wow, now you have an option to franchise. I mean, it's not only is it good for your business, but it gives you another option for potential growth in the future. So there's really no downside in prepping for a process like this. It's good business and makes your business more profitable.
Yeah, every business needs systems and procedures. I work with businesses that aren't franchised. You know, they're not franchised, but they want to grow. And they understand that they need systems and procedures and manuals and modules. And that's what we do, is we put all that stuff into place, whether it's a franchise business or not. We specialize in franchising, but we work with a lot of brands that are not franchised, that are just looking to grow. And you're exactly right. You need the same systems and procedures. And you also need that, even if you're a solopreneur and you want to scale your business one day, that you want to be able to retire and, you know, have someone run your business. Like, I have a consulting firm. Ultimately, I'd like to retire and for people that, you know, keep working without me. So you need the same systems and procedures to put in, and policy manuals, because you want to grow your own business internally. So it's really not very different than a franchise. That's a really good point, Bob.
Right. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I mean, I kind of, Lori didn't say this explicitly, but I'm sure she had this in mind. That's how I think of it. If you ever want to sell your business, you want to choose talking about retiring. I don't know if you intend to sell your consulting firm before you retire or not, but it's, if you're looking to sell, and
yeah,
Bob, we had this conversation a few weeks ago with someone who said they want to run it like they would sell it, even though they don't intend to sell it. And
right.
Which is the right mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about mindset. Absolutely.
All right. Good stuff.
all right. Thank you all. Thanks again, Lori.
Thank you for inviting me. It was my pleasure. Feel free to reach out if you want to pick my brain or anything. It's all
And
free.
Lori, you work in the US as well as Canada?
Yeah, I do more work in the US than I do in Canada. I just haven't left Canada because my children are here.
Okay.
And I'm waiting for grandchildren, so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
You don't get a vote in that, though.
No, I know, I don't get a vote. But I told my son, I said to him, I said, you know, when you're married, I'm going to give you 2 years, and then I'm going to start hacking you for grandchildren. But when he was married 2 years, I said to him, okay, it's time. He says to me, that's not fair, because he was 29. He says, it's not fair. He said, you didn't have me until you were 30. I said to him, okay, you know what? I'll give you till you're 30. So he's going to be 30 in April. So I keep sending him pictures of me holding my great niece and my great nieces, saying, look how cute I look with a baby. So hopefully I'll get one soon.
Thank you, Lori. It's quite
Thanks.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you all.
Thank you.